One of the fundamental concepts that we're going to work with are functions. We express consumers' preference through utility functions. We express firms' production capabilities by production functions. There are lots of different things we express as functions. So what are functions? Given two sets, they could be anything. We've got two sets x and y. A function maps one set to another. So for any little x in capital X, a function, f, will tell us which member of y x should be mapped to. So for instance, let's suppose y were real numbers, which we often denote by r, and x were foods that you could eat. Then if f were your utility function, it would tell you your level of utility, which is a real number, for each possible food that you might eat. We'll represent the member of y that x is mapped to by f of x. For our purposes, usually x and y are going to be represented by the real numbers. Let me give you some examples of these types of functions. The simplest one is what we call the identity function. You take any x in the set x and you map it back to x. So f of x is just x. Another special function is the constant function. It doesn't matter what little x is, f of x is always going to be the same c. C could be, for instance, 2. If f of x equals 2, that means no matter what x is, we're going to map it to the value 2. So here we're going to use c to represent just some constant. C stands for constant, like 2 or 3 or pi, whatever you want it to be. So a constant function is just any function that maps every little x to the same thing. Square root is another function. So for any x that's greater than 0, because we can't define the square root of a negative number as a real number, so take any x that's greater than or equal to 0, we could say f of x is square root of x. That's another function. A special type of function is what we call a linear function. For any little x, f of x is m times x plus c. So c is some constant, as well as m is some constant. So there's some fixed numbers. So an example of this might be f of x equals 3 times x plus 2. So m would be 3 and c would be 2 in this case. Any function that takes this form we call a linear function.